brass slider will go all the way to the bearing, and you can see that we get this much more of right tail rotor authority. Now the T-Rex tail rotor is pretty strong, and I don't know if this actually goes into this area when the gyro makes a correction, but again, it certainly doesn't hurt anything. Normally, the tail rotor servo is mounted to the tail boom back here with these plastic brackets. But if you use a fast, high-speed tail rotor servo, those are heavier than the smaller mini servos. So what happens is the T-Rex 450 has a tendency to get tail heavy. So I've made a special tail rotor servo mount that gets the tail rotor servo as far forward as possible. To mount the tail rotor servo, you use two wooden pieces made out of 1/8" plywood. I'll show you the dimensions in just a moment. And so the bent one goes on the back, and then the straight one lays against the inner side frames and goes down as shown. Now you've got a little space right at this screw, and so what you do is you just use a ball, a steel ball from the kit, and you drill that out, drill the hole out just a little bit so the screw will pass through, and then you use that steel ball as a spacer between the outer side frame and the piece of wood. Here's the ball, and then you'll need 3 longer screws to go through the plywood servo mounts. You have 2 options. One is to shorten the align screw. This is the screw that goes through the vertical fin. The other option is to find a Futaba servo screw. This is the perfect length, 10 to 11 millimeters long, and it has a flanged head, and all that you have to do is just grind the flange off the head. Here are the dimensions to my special tail rotor servo mount. Again, these are for a JR high-speed tail rotor servo. The Futaba servo is a little bit bigger, so you may have to alter the dimensions slightly. Both pieces are made out of 1/8" thick plywood or 2 millimeter thick plywood. Each piece is 6 millimeters wide, and then measuring from the top, the first hole is 3.5 millimeters down, the next one 21 millimeters down, 31, 38, and the overall piece is 42 millimeters. On the bent piece, the angle is 25 degrees. The first hole is 2 millimeters down, the next one 19 millimeters down, and then I start over so that this hole is 8 millimeters down, this hole is 7 millimeters down from this hole, and then 4 millimeters to the end of the piece. What you can do is cut these pieces out of the plywood, soak them with thin CA, and then paint them with black Rust-Oleum. I think it would be kind of neat if a line would come out, or if somebody else would come out with these pieces already made, and again, it would save you the work. When we moved the tail rotor servo up front, all of a sudden the stock pushrod became too short. So what you want to do is whack off the threads of the stock pushrod so it's nice and smooth. And then this is a piece of 48 thousandths piano wire. Glue the ball link to the piano wire, and then this is a 20 millimeter long piece of fuel tubing. There's nothing more that holds these two pushrods than the tension in the fuel tubing. And it's real neat. To adjust the length of the pushrod, all that you have to do is take 2 pliers and just push together or pull apart. And you can get very accurate adjustments this way, and the fuel line will never let the 2 pieces slide when the helicopter's in flight. I'm going to have to cover this tail rotor servo arm information sooner or later, so I might as well do it now so that when we come to the setup, it's all done. Again, this pertains to the JR 3400G tail rotor servo. Take off both long arms, and then from the outside hole of the short arm, just shave off that remaining 2 or 3 millimeters of material. Then go ahead and shave off this ridge that surrounds the screw, and that's what the ridge looks like. Then on the back side of the arm, I've highlighted where the reinforcement comes down to the arm. You need to drill a hole right at the base of this reinforcement. Then, here's the hole drilled at the base of the reinforcement. This is where the ball goes with the screw. You have to use a nut underneath the ball so that the ball is spaced out enough from the screw that holds the servo arm in place. To set the proper belt tension, I've made a 6mm hole in this portion of the side frames. And then what I do is use a wooden dowel, and it's about 1.5 to 2 millimeters wide at the end, and it's rounded off. And then I go ahead and stick the dowel in the hole, and then let me change shots and I'll show you the belt tension that I use. Here's the belt tension that you're looking for. Notice how the belt looks a little poofy as it goes around the front pulley. If the belt is completely straight here, you're running too much belt tension. Again, here's my little wooden dowel rod, and with very light tension, the one side ought to come 1 millimeter away from the other side. If you push a little bit harder, both sides will touch. But anyway, this is perfect belt tension. The belt should be run dry. Do not lubricate the belt because lubrication will attract dirt, which will accelerate belt wear. Here's a plastic tail rotor servo mounting piece, and again you want to use this but not to mount the tail rotor servo. Go ahead and whack off the excess, and then you want to mount it on the tail boom right up against the tail boom mounting blocks. You need this because the plastic is relatively slippery, and if you don't use this, the tail boom will slip forward and your belt tension will loosen up. Again, there's only so much tension that you can put on the screws because they go into plastic inserts. So make sure you don't over-tighten or strip these screws. As you cut out the bottom of the canopy, cut exactly on the lines that they give you. The reason that you want to do this is because if you go too wide here, the canopy will slop back and forth left and right, and about 5 millimeters in is where the canopy bumps against the bottom plate. So you want to make sure that you cut right on this line. Here's a really slick way to get rid of the flange around the edge of the canopy. What you do is you use a Mototool with a sanding drum, and you simply put the drum behind and sand right on the edge until the flange falls away. Here's what it looks like. And then you can touch up the rest with 320 sandpaper. You can learn about applying canopy stickers in Volume 4 and 5 of my DVD series. This is a stock T-Rex canopy, and again, the only problem with the stock stickers is that they all look the same. I wanted something a little different, so in my mind I was visualizing a classic Bell Jet Ranger paint scheme. So what I did is I took some blue low-tack masking tape and sketched out a design and sent it to Callie of Callie Graphics. And this is what she sent back. It's nothing sophisticated, but it reminds me of the good old Jet Ranger, and certainly there's not another T-Rex canopy that looks like this one. Here's the stock Align canopy standoff. I found it to be too long because it really spreads the rear portion of the canopy out. So to rectify that problem, I found some shorter standoffs from helidirect.com. These are $4.99 for a set of 2, and the part number is HDX 450-SCM. When you install these, the canopy will lay perfectly naturally back on the rear of the side frames. I've been fortunate. I haven't crashed my T-Rex 450 yet, but from those who have, they say the canopy standoffs can break the carbon fiber back here. So in an attempt to strengthen up this area, I've taken the standoff from up here, and again you could buy an extra one and replace it, but I've taken the standoff and screwed the Helidirect standoffs into this cross piece. This really strengthens up this whole back area. This is my son's T-Rex 450 with the Spektrum DX6 radio installed. I'll refer to this as the novice setup because of the low battery position. Now this is nice and it's easy to install the radio because the wires come right into the receiver and the battery just slips in through the zip tie, and I've got two rubber bands that just hold the battery in place, and then I've got a piece of ACE 1/8" foam tape on each side frame, and that keeps the battery centered between the side frames. Now, the reason I refer to this as the novice setup is that with the battery low, that puts the center of gravity of the helicopter relatively low, and that gives a lot of pendulum effect and it gives stability, but it's not necessarily the best thing for aerobatics. Let me show you another option for better aerobatics. In the T-Rex 450 we're building, we're going to mount the battery in the high position. So I've got the gyro mounted down here, the receiver goes in front of the gyro. Then I'll use a piece of 1/4" foam rubber on the battery plate, and then we'll mount the battery on the battery plate and use a Lines Velcro strap to hold it in place. What happens is that when you raise the position of the battery, the whole center of gravity of the helicopter comes up. This will give much better aerobatics. It'll give better rolls, and it'll also give more stable inverted hovering because the center of gravity is closer to the main rotor disc. So if you want the best aerobatics, use this battery placement. If you want the most stable hovering, use the lower battery placement. There's an aluminum collar on the main shaft, and it just sits right above the top bearing. It's secured with 2 set screws. The problem is the set screws stick out about 1 millimeter from the edge of the collar. That presents a problem when you deflect the swash plate to high rates of deflection because that set screw will grab and gall on the inside of the swash plate. To prevent that, you want to take a grinding stone in your Mata tool and just take the grinding stone and grind the set screw down flush with the collar. After you do that, there will still be plenty of set screw left so that you can tighten it and loosen it with a 1.5 millimeter wrench. Here's the washout unit in the T-Rex 450. Pretty small, isn't it? I've drawn a larger diagram. Here's the arm that goes down to the swash plate. Here's the main portion of the arm. And I want to talk about how these two pieces fit together. When you take this unit out of the box and you flip the washout arm back and forth, you say, "Ooh, that works very nicely." Well, it does, but only because it's really not assembled the right way. When they assemble these arms at the factory, they just lightly tighten this screw. And so the reason the unit works nice and smoothly is because the screw is actually pivoting inside the brass bushing. The way it's supposed to work is that the brass bushing should pivot inside this arm, and so the screw and the brass bushing should be one unit. And if you tighten up this screw, you'll see that it doesn't work so smoothly. The reason it doesn't work so smoothly is that the hole for the brass bushing is actually tapered just a little bit. And so what you have to do is take a very sharp drill bit that's just a few thousandths smaller than the hole and just spin it with your fingers, test fit the bushing. Spin it with your fingers and test fit the bushing. When you have a perfect fit, you'll be able to take the bushing and just drop it through the arm. Then you can go ahead and assemble the arm. Again, make sure that there's no flash on either piece here because the flash will cause interference. Go ahead, assemble the arm, tighten the screw, and now the bushing will pivot inside this arm the way it's supposed to. But now you'll find you have side-to-side play, and that will show up in the control system. So the way to make this unit nice and tight is to use Trinity shims number 4030. This is an RC car part, so any hobby shop that has RC car parts should be able to order you these Trinity shims. What I do is put one shim in one side, and that will take out the side play, and with that done, the washout unit will work perfectly. Here you can see the Teflon shim that I've slipped in to take out the lateral play, and after I've massaged this link, look how nice and free that is. Go ahead and compare that to the other side where I can barely flip the link up and down, and as a matter of fact, if I take the drill bit that I used to to fine-tune the other side. If I lay the drill bit on the link, it still won't push the link down. So it's this kind of stiffness that can really throw off and make your control system sticky, and that's what volume 4 and 5 is all about. There's only about one upgrade I'd recommend for the T-Rex 450S, and that's the metal flybar seesaw holder. This is a beautiful unit, and actually you don't have to buy this right off. You can just go ahead and fly your T-Rex until you crash, and then the plastic flybar seesaw holder will probably break, and then you can go ahead and buy this unit. This is HS1128T-78 and costs about $19. It's a beautiful piece and comes with the flybar. The head button that comes with the T-Rex 450S is really neat, but I don't use it. And the reason I don't use it is that because at the extremes of collective and cyclic pitch, you can see how the linkage bumps the head button. So what I prefer to do is just go ahead and remove it, and in its place I'll use a little anodized collar with a nice short bolt. You want to make sure that the bolt only sticks out about 2-3 millimeters longer than the collar, because you don't want the bolt to bump the blade axle. So I just go ahead and screw that in, and that finishes up my head block. Here's a little modification that you do at your own risk because it does weaken the blade grip a little bit. But at the extremes of collective and cyclic throw, this ball link will come and bump up against the reinforcement on the bottom of the blade grip. To take care of that, I just take a little sander and chuck it up in the Mata tool and just grind away a little bit of plastic like you see here, and then you have much more throw and the ball link won't interfere with the blade grip. In volumes 4 and 5 of my DVD series, I advise that you flip the blade grips so the pitch arm comes off of the leading edge of the main rotor blade. I give the reasons and justification for doing so. Now, I've done that to the T-Rex that I'm currently flying. For the T-Rex that we're building, I'm going to go ahead and leave that in the stock configuration for this particular setup. However, once you get some experience, you can flip the blade grips. To do that, first, of course, you flip the blade grip, then the flybar piece or the flybar seesaw needs to be flipped, and the mixer arms will come off as shown. Then this ball is slightly off center, so this shaft needs to be removed and flipped 180 degrees and reinstalled. Then the most difficult part of the conversion is you have to do a little modification to the washout hub, and I'll show you how to do that. When that's done, the washout arms will hook up as shown, and then the collective pitch will work backwards, so you'll have to go into your CCPM menu and reverse the collective pitch. Here's how to modify the washout hub. You've got a 1 millimeter ridge of plastic here, and then you've also got a 1 millimeter ridge of plastic here. So right on the edge of this ridge, score it with a razor blade, and then you want to strip off this plastic. Let me go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Here's what you'll end up with. Now, put this piece in a vise, and I'm using this ball link pliers to show how it would be in a vise. Set it up like this, then take a hardwood block. It has to be either oak or maple. It can't be anything soft such as pine. Put a hardwood block on top of the brass piece and then tap the brass piece so it comes down flush with the plastic ridge. Here's the finished washout hub. If you want to, you can take a razor blade and shave off any excess plastic flush with the brass sleeve, and then install it on the main shaft in this orientation, attach the washout arms, and you're all set. All main rotors and tail rotors must be balanced. You can't take for granted that the main rotor or the tail rotor is going to be in perfect balance. So I've shown the complete process in volume 6 of my DVD series, and here's how this particular rotor head turned out. You'll notice that I've painted one blade tip white and the other blade tip black. This is so it makes it easy to visually track the blades. And then It's taken this much tracking tape to bring this rotor system perfectly in balance. Let me show you a few of my radio installation mounting details. Here's the tail rotor servo wire and its connector. I have a little zip tie where it's zip tied to the side frames, and basically the same thing up front. Here's the JR 500T gyro, and it's mounted to the base plate with ACE number 306 double-sided mounting tape, 1/8 inch thick. This stuff is available from Ron Lund of Rick's RC. I haven't been able to find it anywhere else, and it's great because it sticks nicely, yet you can peel it off when you want to get it off. I've used the ACE foam mounting tape 2 layers laterally and then 1 piece longitudinally to hold the 2 lateral pieces together, and that forms a little table where I can mount the AR6100 receiver. This is just temporary. I haven't taken off the backing yet because we have to check the gyro sensitivity and the switches, basically the reverse switch in the gyro, before I make this mount permanent. Then for the battery mounting plate, you know how I told you earlier with the side frames to go ahead and round the side frames and soak them with thin CA? We'll do the same thing to the bottom of the battery mounting plate because the wires can come and bump up against the bottom of the plate. Notice how tight the plugs fit into the AR6100 receiver. With some of the JR connectors, they're fat at the top, and that presents a problem when you try to get 6 plugs all plugged in. So what you want to do is take a drum sander and a Mata tool and grind off the fat portion of the plug, essentially make the top of the plug the same thickness as the bottom of the plug. And when you do that, all the plugs will fit in much better. With our little T-Rex built, it's time to dive into radio theory.